Good morning. My name is Brian Gruen. I have the honor of serving as the pastor at First Congregational Church of Kittery at Kittery Point United Church of Christ in Kittery Point, Maine. I wanted to send out a nice warm video today because I have good news to share with you. And I wanted to do it outdoors in the sun, but it's rainy and cold outside. So I'm indoors yet again. So often I'm indoors right now, even though I would love to be outside with the birds and the trees and with friends. Oh, listening to live music. Maybe even taking in a sporting event. I'm not a big sports fan, but I like a trip to Fenway as much as anybody. Oh, so much I long to do these things, and yet here I am, stuck indoors. But like I said, I have good news to share with you. And the good news I have to share is this. God is with us and anything is possible. If you're having a hard time believing that to be true, if I say that and it doesn't sound true to you, it's probably because that's not the experience you're having right now. It may not necessarily feel like the divine is with us or that anything is possible. And there's a name for this, friends. When we are thinking about how much we want to be with our families or be back to normal or go out and celebrate life, or we're thinking about God being with us and all things being possible, and our experience is the experience of quarantine during a historic pandemic, in which we're not even allowed to be in the same room as our families. That's called cognitive dissonance. There's a term for it. I'm not licensed in any way, shape, or form to talk about psychological things. All I can do is share with you my understanding. My understanding of cognitive dissonance is it is the experience of having what is happening physically in your life disconnected from what's happening in your mind. We get certain thoughts or certain ideas in our mind, and they don't connect with what's really happening in the world. And that creates dissonance, disconnect. And in general, disconnect is not healthy or helpful for human beings. In general, human beings thrive, we live the best, when our lives can be reconciled, when our lives are coherent, when the beliefs and the views that we hold of the world match our physical living in the world, when we have a feeling of wholeness, of being a whole human being who belongs and fits in the world just as we are. That's usually when we're at our best. And for so many of us right now, that is not our experience. Our experience is of saying God loves us and we are God's beloved and God is the God of life and love and justice, and we're stuck indoors and the weather's terrible outside. And there's a historic pandemic that is ripping through poor communities, affecting the elderly and the vulnerable the most. It's a time of great dissonance, of great disconnect. So why would I start this video saying I have good news for you? Well, for one thing, it keeps you watching the video. In order to understand the good news I have to offer, we have to really wrestle with cognitive dissonance. First of all, we have to be aware that it's a thing. If your experience of quarantine is anything like mine, you're finding yourself getting tired and worn out and distracted, and you're finding holes in your own ability to think and keep track of things. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because we are so disconnected from the life that we've known that our minds, our bodies, our spirits, we're learning new things all the time. And when you're in the process of building and reforming and doing new things, lots of things slip through the cracks. It just happens. Nobody's perfect. None of us can do all the things all the time. So as we're trying to learn new ways of being and new ways of thinking, we drop things. We drop pieces of information. We forget what day it is. Our bodies are out of sync. We're hungry or sleepy or angry at very strange times for very different reasons. It's dissonance. You're not alone. We're all experiencing it to some degree or another. And today is May 1st, 2020. And today brings with it yet another form of dissonance. Good news. Here's some good news. For the last several days, it appears to be true that our trend for this terrible virus in Maine is starting to curve down. We're starting to see fewer people infected with the virus, fewer people hospitalized, fewer people dying. This is amazing news. And it has everything to do with how our community, our town, our entire state has largely cooperated with this quarantine time during this pandemic. And our efforts are so successful. We've given up so much. We've sacrificed so much. We've changed our lives almost entirely overnight. And it's working. We've done it so that we can express love to our neighbors and keep people healthy and alive for as long as possible, slowing the spread of the virus, and it's working. And because it's working, there are certain powers and forces in our world that are encouraging us to change yet again. And as of today, the state of Maine is implementing I believe they're referring to it as a slow and responsible effort to get our state economy back up and running, to get people back to work. As of today, there are a few businesses that can be opened again that were closed before. The stay-at-home order is still in effect. So as much as possible, we're still being asked to self-quarantine, to stay home, to continue limiting the spread of the virus. But it means that we're entering into a time that's going to feel even more dissonant than before. Because now we're going to have people trying to go back to normal. Not exactly normal. Hopefully there's a change in business practices so that things are largely safe. But now we're going to have different segments of our society really pushing to go back to the way things were, to go back to normal. And that creates a lot of dissonance for us because that energy, that desire to work again and earn an income again and get back to normal again, that's disconnected from our experience of a global pandemic that is still very much in progress. The virus isn't eliminated, it's not gone, it's still here. And many of us are very concerned. Many of us are filled with a lot of anxiety and fear because the more people who go back out into the world and start acting like normal, the virus is just going to come back and infect more people and kill more people. So that sense of fear or dread or anxiety, it goes right along with the feelings of exhaustion, the feelings of isolation, loneliness, sadness, hunger. All of it are experiences of dissonance, of disconnect. We've all read the reports. We've all seen that until there is a vaccine, some kind of cure for this virus, it's going to be with us. And it could last for years. There's no sense in sugarcoating that or dancing around it. It's reality. It's where we are at. I listened to a podcast today where they were debating about how quickly the NFL could get up and running for their new season. I received a phone call today from really nice folks who have come over several times to do a deep clean of the parsonage because Emily and I have a hard time keeping up with the deep cleaning that's really needed to have a safe, clean living space. They said, hey, the state is lifting certain restrictions. We have the ability to come by your house and do a cleaning. When would you like us to come? Well, the virus isn't gone. We still don't have any ability to know who has it. We certainly don't feel comfortable having people in our living space. Even if they're there to clean, they could potentially bring the virus with them and breathe it into the air. It could land on a surface and then we all get sick. Dissonance. The desire to go back to normal. And the lived experience that there is not that normal anymore. That normal is gone. And that's something to be grieved. That's something to mourn. What do we do with this dissonance? When we're living these lives that are feeling so disjointed and disconnected, how do we start to feel whole again? How do we start to plan living our lives for the next 2 years? Well, I did say I have good news. Good news doesn't necessarily mean happy news. The good news for us, friends, is that God is very much with us. And not only are we not alone, not only do we have one another to go on this journey with, but we are connected to an ancient faith tradition that includes people who have been in this very spot before. Not under the same circumstances, but very much the same. The very first generation of Christ followers, they had the experience of knowing that death wasn't the end of anything. That Christ was brought back from the dead and continued to live. And that experience changed everything for them. There was no normal anymore. They had to sit and think and talk and reflect about what life would be like now and what humanity could be capable of now with this revelation. They experienced a time of quarantine. I'm not making this up. In the Bible, it says after Jesus was resurrected, there was a period of 40 days. Now, whenever the Bible says a period of 40 days, they really mean a long period of time. Could have been 40 days, could have been 2 years, could have been longer. We don't have any way of knowing. There's different ways of guessing, but we don't know. But so they had this extended period of time after Jesus was resurrected where they shut themselves off from the world because they were terrified of what might happen to them if they were found to be followers of Jesus. And during that time, Christ appeared before them. And Christ talked with them, broke bread with them. Christ taught them about God's realm coming to earth as it is in heaven. And they spent that entire time of quarantine, that 40 days or more, dreaming together about what the world could look like now. Now that there was the promise of God's reconciliation, bringing people back together, bringing humans back together with one another, bringing humanity to a new connection with the earth and the rest of the universe. For a period of 40 days, they dreamt and envisioned and talked about what this might look like, and then they went out into the world and they lived in a completely new way than they had before. When we talk about what's normal, we're actually talking about a very narrow box. The only way you can have normal anything, normal standards, normal expectations, is when everyone can agree on what normal is. And human beings don't tend to agree on very much at all. So it always ends up being a very narrow box, a very small slice. And when we talk a lot about normal, like normal is the goal is to be normal, to get back to normal, to live normally, what we're really saying is it's too exhausting to take responsibility for ourselves. It's too scary to be fully ourselves. It's It's too much chaos and too much work to try to figure out for ourselves what is good and how to live and how to make good choices and how to be responsible for our decisions. It's just too much. We want a standard. We want a little sliver of standard of normalcy. We want somebody to tell us what it is, and we will do almost anything to get inside that box, even if it means leaving behind important parts of our humanity. That was my experience as a teenager. It's why I didn't like being a teenager very much. There was a lot of expectation. Be normal. Fit in this box. And if that means leaving your questions, your curiosity, your sense of humor, if it means leaving all that at the door, good, do that. Be normal. And this pandemic is revealing to us all the time just how narrow normal is. There are some people who are getting to have a very normal experience right now. And then there's the people who can't afford normal, who are excluded from normal, who are being infected and isolated and fired and furloughed. That creates a lot of dissonance. We want this so badly, but we find ourselves out here. But friends, just as the ancestors of our faith had the opportunity to do, we have the opportunity during this time to let the divine inspire us, to show us not how to get back to normal, but to show us what is possible, to show us what the world and what our human lives might look like being reconciled with God. And if we're willing to receive those visions, if we're willing to work together, if we're willing to be patient, if we're willing to show some solidarity with one another and with those who are suffering most from this pandemic, then I don't think it's going to take 2 years to learn how to be whole. It might take 2 years to develop a vaccine and let us go back living our lives however we choose. But there are many options on the table long before then. Because each and every one of us are beloved by God. And God is with each and every one of us. And when God is with us, nothing will be impossible. So, as we hear the drum beats of our culture that are demanding we start earning again, we start producing again, we get back to normal, I invite you to say, no, thank you. I invite you to reflect on the small blessings, the hidden joys, the mysterious, magical things that have been happening during this time of quarantine. It's been hard. It's going to continue to be hard. But there's little nuggets of joy for each of us. Creation is coming back in new ways. We're reconnecting with people in ways that we haven't in a long time. We're re-examining our own lives and finding what's most important to us. And we're having an opportunity to confess the sins of our world. We're having an opportunity to do better, to not make the same mistakes over and over and over again. Mistakes that will inevitably lead us right back to where we are right now. So in the coming days and weeks, I invite you to continue connecting on Sunday mornings for worship as we explore together what God's promise of reconciliation, God's promise of wholeness for us looks like. I invite you to continue connecting with our community in many ways. A new version of our directory is going out in the morning today. Grab a hold of that directory, call some friends from the church, call people who you haven't seen in person in a while, check in on them, see how people are doing. Send people letters, find ways of showing up in one another's lives that are safe. Find ways of living that are not normal, that are better than normal, better than what we had before. It's not that we can't do it, it's that it's hard. And it's exhausting. And it requires a lot of responsibility from each and every one of us. And we can do it. Because God is with us. so all things are possible. It's my hope for you, friends, that in the coming days and weeks, we experience less dissonance and disconnect, and we start living into the wholeness that God promises each of us. I'll see you soon. We're going to find some way of having fun and serving one another in our needs. Peace and grace be with you.